Hello, year 13s. So, I thought I'd do a little breakdown of what your exams are going to look like and what is included in each paper, just to reassure you and sort of reduce the stress levels as you build towards your first exam next week. Okay, so first thing to start is next week, obviously, you'll be having paper one on Wednesday, which is physical geography. And these are the topics you've been covering. Okay, so it's a 2 hour and 15-minute exam. It's a total of about 105 marks, which equates to about 30% of your whole A level grade. Okay, in year 12, the two physical geography topics we studied were tectonics and water, whilst in year 13, two topics, sorry, were carbon and water. Okay, and then after half term, you're going to have your paper two, which is human geography. Again, same weight to that paper. It's a 2 out of 15 exam for 105 marks, 30% of your A level, and that will cover the topics of globalization and regeneration, which was in year 12, and superpowers and health and human rights in year 13. Okay. Those are the two kind of biggest papers. You then have a paper three, that is going to happen at the very end of the exam season. It's a, it's a, I hate to say that, but it's an exam where you don't necessarily need to revise specifically for, because it only covers content that you've previously revised for paper one and two. If that makes sense, okay? So it's what we call a synoptic paper. It's worth 70 marks or 20% of your overall grade, and it's asking you to do an investigation on a geographical issue in a specific location that you're not told about until the day of the exam. So the best way to kind of describe it is it's very much like your when you did your GCSEs in paper three, you had a pre-release where we got to see a issue. In a pre-release booklet, we analyze it. You went into the exam, you answered a question about this booklet. It's exactly the same, except that the booklet isn't pre-released. You see it for the first time during that exam. So it's actually quite a long exam. Um, but it's not got as it doesn't have as many marks as paper one and two because they give you the time to try and cover the booklet. So, for instance, in the paper one and paper two, you can have a few 12 markers and 20 markers. There, you only have one huge 18 or 24 mark question in paper three, based on the booklet. Okay, there's also only three different options of themes. You can either have a booklet on tectonics. You can either have carbon and water, or you can have something to do with globalization and superpowers. Okay, it's always about one of these topics. It's always about a hypothetical. It's always about a contextual example around the world. So last year, from top of my mind, I would say it was small island nations and how they were vulnerable to hazards. And so you're looking at the difference between a hazard and a disaster, why they're more vulnerable, how are they more vulnerable, and that's where you kind of, from tectonics, you bring your knowledge of bring knowledge of Haiti, you bring the knowledge of preparedness, you look at the fact that our small islands are isolated, they're at risk of more than one type of hazards, which they can be tectonic earthquakes, volcanoes, it can technically also cause tsunamis, etc. So that's where you have to bring a overall understanding of a topic. Notice there's no coast, okay, so you'll never be asked questions about coast in paper three. So that's how it's broken down. And obviously, there's also your NEA, which is worth the same as your paper three, but you'll know that it's already done. The marks have already been submitted. It's 70 marks, 20%, so that's kind of cashed in. You know your grades already, okay? So, in coast, in year 12 in physical geography, you do coast. A lot of it is to do with the theories of how what happens along the coastline and the processes. You then have a look at the way you can manage, and you also look at stakeholders and conflict. Okay, whereas in tectonics, you have a look at why tectonic activity occurs, why some areas are more at risk than others, and again how you can manage tectonic activities. In globalization and regeneration, it's the only two topics that I've never taught at Key Stage 5. So I can't really tell you with 100% factual information on there, but I know it's going to be about how areas of British cities have improved and regenerated. So you've got pictures there of London. You can think of the same about Bristol Harborside. How is it? Use changed over time. It's gone from industrial to post-industrial. I know you learn about Detroit, you learn about London. We look at Bristol Harborside. You do some trips around the Bristol Harborside and Temple Quarter area, and some of you will even have written your NEA on regeneration, and whilst the others will have written your NEA on coast. Okay, and globalization is basically looking at how the world is more and more interconnected. What connects us to the US and to Canada, etc., without necessarily moving. A lot of our modern lives are interconnected, intertwined with people around our planet. Okay, and year 13, you look at superpowers, which is basically your big international organizations and alliances. So you look at some hegemonic powers like the USA. You look at bipolar world, which was the USSR and the USA. You look at multipolar world, and there's a good picture there of the flags from the BRICS economy. So Brazil, India, China, um, South Africa, and Russia, and how they're growing in power. So you look at you also look at the G7, the G20. You look at organizations like the EU, the IMF, the World Bank, and you have a look at how all these massive institutions try and influence the way the world is set up. And so it's just a really interesting way of looking at the growing economies of what we know as NEs, how they're trying to becoming more and more powerful. We also look at health and so we then have a look at health and human rights in year 13 in human geography, and they basically it's a bit of an odd unit because it's got a 4 inquiry question. The first one is about development predominantly. You then have a look at the impact development has on health. Then you have a look at the impact between development and human rights. So yeah, it's kind of I'm going to make a specific video about each inquiry question for health and human rights because it's quite a huge unit compared to superpowers. And then in physical geography, you look at the carbon and the water cycle. They both work together in some ways because what happens in the carbon cycle will affect what happens in the water cycle. I'm thinking more high temperatures mean more evaporation, which will mean more moisture in the air. Remember, it's about 1 degree increase in temperature. It adds 7% moisture, so you get more intense rainfall. And although it's warmer, you might have droughts, but you might have more flooding and more intense storms. Okay, so you do think about how they can link. But that is understanding basically the fast and slow carbon cycle, energy security and insecurity in carbon. And for water, similar thing: water security, water insecurity, how we use our water consumption, how we can overcome this, and all the geopolitical aspects of these two cycles. Okay. Um, and then your field work, just as a reminder, okay, you've got lots of different case studies and examples you learn in class, but realistically, they're two places you've experienced incredibly well. So Slapton and Start Bay, the residential and coast. We haven't technically done, at no point in the units of coast did we learn about Slapton as a case study, but you went there, you were there, you saw it for yourself. Feel free to use it as an example to back up some of the claims you make in your coast part of the exam, okay? Same for Temple Quarter and Lawrence Hill. Think in regeneration. You might have learnt about Detroit, okay? But actually, when you have to talk about regeneration, if you feel more confident using a case that you've actually seen live in, some of you will live in and around Lawrence Hill and Temple Quarter, do use it, okay? So yeah, there are two examples of case studies you could use. There are two places you've learnt about. You've wrote your NE on one of these two places. So try and use that extra knowledge into your paper 1 and 2. It will help, okay? And the key thing as you prepare for your exams is don't forget to read around your subject. Okay, it's really important to add those nuggets of gold. Yes, our lessons, I promise you, we've done the best lessons we can possibly teach you. We're confident we've taught you everything that you need to know and you're ready to go. But if you can bring some extra nuggets of information, things you've read in your own time, okay, there's lots of these we've signposted to. You know our obsession with Simon Reeve in geography. There's some phenomenal Simon Reeve episodes and series on BBC iPlayer. David Attenborough, you'll know how important he is in geography world. But then you've got slightly less known presenters on the BBC, like you've got Sue Perkins and Ade Adepitan, who do some really good recent episodes on rivers and continents. Weirdly, Zac Efron on Netflix, also Down to Earth, has some great videos about various resources. You've got some books. Books are so important. You don't have to read all the time. You can watch episodes, but reading is important. There's a series there of some of my favorite. There's a geography library in the faculty department. Come and borrow some books and magazines if you want to. And then there's some websites down here which I recommend you visit. There's some YouTube channels. We've launched our YouTube, or I've launched my YouTube channel, Mr. Vis Geography. You can have a look at past exam questions there, etc. There's so much information there with our Google Drive you can use to revise and be prepared. Okay. Ask if you've got any questions, but you've got everything here in order to succeed. Okay. Good luck, and we're really rooting for you.